How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. It's lovely to see you. You have a very professional background there, which I can tell is someone who does a lot of these now.
Well, you look like you're in an office, though. That's unusual.
I know. I thought I'd go al fresco and start working back in an office again. So I'm in Cambridge today, and I'm enjoying being around some people actually.
Oh, very good. Yeah, yeah. No, I haven't been into an office for ages. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, I think people are slowly but surely beginning to experiment and come back. It seems quite a novelty actually.
Yeah. Well, my idea for 2021 is that the outside is the new virtual. Really, I think we're going to be doing lots more outside.
And you've been an advocate of that, yeah. Okay, well, Peter, first of all, thank you for joining me. I'm really grateful to you for being on this. Peter Murray, Curator-in-Chief of the NLA. And I would say, for myself, godfather of architecture of London, really. You have been, I guess, not just curating the NLA, but curating what happens within our profession for a number of years. And you've been advising, you've been a chief advocate for so many successful leading practitioners in the profession. The people that actually have shaped the city, shaped the country really. And you've had their ear and you've been advising them when they're saying, what do you think? And we now find ourselves in a world, I guess, Peter, when we go back, you've been through numerous recessions, and to my mind, I think I can remember the 1991, I can remember 2008, and I can remember this one, and they've been the three that's really affected me. But beyond that, it was stuff that I was at university or I saw other people doing, or but you've been actually advising people through that period. So how have you found this? Where are we? What is the state of the world we're in your view, in retrospect, with all of those areas?
I would say, first of all, very lucky that we have technology like this, where so many organizations have been able to keep going during this very difficult period. And it makes me think actually about the way that architects traditionally have had to deal with recessions, and they deal with it in very different ways because of technology. A few years ago, when I was visiting Chandigarh, I looked through the correspondence between Max Fry, Jane Drew and the Indian government about the fact that in order to work for a couple of years in Chandigarh on the housing there, Max Fry and Jane Drew actually had to close down their whole office. The Indian government recompensed them for their turnover, lost turnover, but they had to move out there in order to be able to work. And then you go to the recession of the 1970s, for instance. I remember talking to Brian Henderson, who was then partner of YRM. They got a huge job, which was Sultan Qaboos University in Oman. And in order to do that, they had to move a whole office out into the region in order to deliver the project. But actually, back in 2008, 2009, a young architect, all they needed was a laptop and an airplane ticket, and they could go and work almost anywhere in the world, and they could stay at home and they could actually do a lot of the work from home, because by that time we had the internet, people were operating digitally, and we had the capacity to do that. So right now, I think we are very lucky that we have technology that allows us to carry on. Without it, I think we would be in a much more difficult place. But I also believe, as you look back at recessions, that actually, huge problems like this do also present opportunities, and sometimes they're really tough. I mean, I can remember in the 1970s that, the 70s for younger architects, it was paper architecture. It was, there was hardly anything to build. I remember even John Young, who was then a partner of Richard Rogers and partners, needed to get a job working in driving a taxi just to sort of keep body and soul together. But, out of that period came, I might say, resurgence of architectural thinking. I worked quite a lot with Will Alsop at the time, all his thinking that really came from that downtime, which the recession delivered ideas, thinking, and led to the resurgence in British architecture, which we still feel today.
So do you think, a situation like this is basically, we're looking ahead, it's going to create some stunning pieces of work, some opportunities. There are going to be some amazing innovators that come out of this, and we can already begin to hear some of the discussion about ideas that people see, even the idea of working in an office. Do we need an office anymore? That seems to be the conversation, certainly within the city. If you go to Liverpool Street, it seems like a ghost town still. But as you rightly said, I think a lot of people are working from home and practices are changing. So how will that affect the collaboration idea? How will that affect human beings being with each other? How will people develop business, for example? Will it change the culture of the way the city is run?
I think a lot of those things, it'll do a lot of those things, but I would say for architects particularly, the world is crying out for design. You have a situation where actually probably every single office building in the world has to be rethought, and there are designers who do that sort of thing, and there should be many more wanting to do it. And the COVID-19 has accelerated a whole series of issues to do with the way we use cities, which are, as I say, crying out for design as well. How do we improve the performance of buildings? Loads of work that architects should be doing that. Even how we use cities better. There are loads of small sites programs through cities throughout the UK and probably overseas as well, but certainly in cities in the UK. How do architects can deal with that sort of thing so well, but they need to do more, I think, be more entrepreneurial in terms of getting in touch with people who give jobs. At the moment, the government announced only the other day, 170,000 new homes, units can be delivered by building 2 stories on top of existing buildings as a part of the new permitted development rights. Now, the problem is that most of the people who are going to do that, they want to avoid planning permission. They apply for, they propose 2 floors on top of a building. They go to the cheapest builder and put up a load of crap. The architecture profession should be out there. The RIBA has attacked the whole idea of doing it. What they should be saying to their members, look, it's your job to get to those clients and make sure they hire you as Mr. Architect to design something which is half decent. That the architecture profession ought to be out there to say, here we are. We can actually deliver this better than just using your local builder to do the designs. And I've always thought that there is such a pathetically low percentage of planning applications which are actually put in by architects. Now, the profession as a whole tends to look at that as some sort of insult. Any other business would look at that as an opportunity. Look at this huge marketplace that we could really get ourselves into. And I think that entrepreneurialism is, really something that architects need to grasp more. Some do. And at the moment, I'm chairman of the London Society. Now, the London Society in the First World War, which was the mega depression of all time, really, they actually got volunteer architects, people who weren't out fighting in the trenches, all got together and they developed the first London plan, which was published in 1918, which has been, I'd say, the model for a lot that has happened in London ever since, and certainly impacted on the 1944 Abercrombie plan of London too. So that's architects again being entrepreneurial. As a student, I was my thesis was on Buckminster Fuller's World Design Science Decade. Bucky thought that architects were the people who could actually help save the world. The World Design Science Decade was around his idea of the spaceship Earth, which is very much what green thinking is about today, about how you save resources, recycle, all sorts of very innovative things. But Bucky had that idea, but actually in the end, architects didn't really step up to the plate in the way that he had hoped. And I would say there are a whole series of areas where architects can get involved, and programs that I've done hint at what can happen. I mean, the whole of the London Festival of Architecture really is about putting local communities in touch with architects and architectural practices, architects getting involved in communities, and telling people who don't normally think of using architects that architects can actually improve people's lives and deliver things which are better.
So if we're looking at this situation we're in, this environment, for architects to take the lead and say, it's not on the back foot and saying, oh, no one's coming to us, there's nothing happening, but instead proactively going out and saying, hang on, this creates an opportunity for all of you public out there, and we're going to help you. We're going to visualize this for you. We're going to, what would you advise practices? What would you advise a young practice, a small practice, or even a big practice? What should their mentality be right now? How can they best engage? How can they best offer service to their public? How can they make themselves the visionaries that I think everybody like Buckminster Fuller was back then? How can we be the natural progression of what architecture should be going forward?
I think it's obviously at various levels, and it depends very much on the scale of firms. Smaller local firms have a different area where they can influence, and the issue there is obviously you can't do anything for nothing. You need to get fees, or you need to get paid in some way. And there are the Mayor of London has through crowdfunding. There are all sorts of community funds that can be accessed. So I think there are ways of smaller practices getting into areas where there is a certain amount of finance to make things happen. Streetscape or street space issues at the moment are huge in local areas right across London. Actually, how do you actually create better places? There is a huge opportunity at the moment to move the program of healthy streets because of the changes that have happened during lockdown. There is a problem at the moment that actually, because of the lack of consultation, there is a lot of anti attitudes towards this. And actually, I think this is where architects can be advocates. They can get involved in local debate, and hopefully by utilizing, I say, things like crowdfunding, mayoral grants and so on, can actually get some fees out of this, because they can't do everything for nothing. I think that larger firms clearly need to look at their areas of expertise, and can actually, I think, probably maybe better often than being entrepreneurial and seeing where the opportunities lie for creating work that is not only generated by people knocking on their door and saying, can you help us?
In terms of, I think, practitioners going forward, when they are eventually allowed to come back to their offices, what should they have learned? What should they have come back with? What should their mentality and mindset be different to the way they were when they started going home in March?
Well, I think it is reflecting changes which have happened across society more broadly. I think there is a real feeling that collaboration is better than antagonism in the way we deal with people. And I hope that that feeling of support that has emanated out of the current situation, I hope that will continue. And I think that provides an ideal opportunity for designers and architects to get involved in what is happening in communities, but also being able to show the benefits that good design, which responds to the demands of people more generally. So I think it will probably lead to a better understanding of our relationship with the wider community. No, it's not just a matter of ticking the boxes in consultation. It is a matter of a wider collaborative idea of how we create better places to live.
And if you were going to give 3 tips, Peter, to people out there for the next ongoing, I mean, I was just looking at this prior to our call. The last few recessions have had 5 quarters of downturn. That seems to be the pattern. So it's basically a year and a quarter. And if we've done maybe so far from March to now, we've done 2 quarters, we're probably, if it follows the same pattern of the last 2, we've got probably this time next year, we should be looking a little bit healthier. But the thing is, I think people can accept that kind of thing if they can focus on an end goal, you know, an end line. So they say, okay, well, we need to economize, we need to do everything for the next kind of 6 months or whatever it is, and then we can start moving forward. But in that time, what are the best tips that you think you can offer to practices, to young individual architects, even to the creative industry as a whole? I mean, let's not forget, you know, the theatres can't open, the actors can't open, and architecture is part of a creative community. It's you know, it's a whole. So I take on board the point you made earlier about back in the 70s, John Young kind of driving taxis to manage, and those kind of stories are quite legendary now. I think a lot of us have kind of grown up and admired the kind of strength of character to do that, to get you through that period and then come back to your art. But then at the end of the day, like you've rightly identified, that art has to be entrepreneurial and it has to be a business. It's not, you know, people are not gentle folk anymore where they can afford to do it for the love of doing it. They have to make a living. So in this period when they're kind of shot down, what is the best way, do you think, for them to go out there and say, this is how we're going to start developing work? Sorry, that was a very long blast.
No, I would say two simple ideas, really. First of all, realize that cash is king when you're running a business. That it's very easy to leech cash when times are hard, but that's the thing that can really bring you down. So and you know, all credit to Rishi and the government that they did actually provide facilities for companies to remain liquid even during difficult times. And maybe they're loans, but they are loans which are you know, low interest. And you know, this really is very different to, for instance, the recession in the 1970s when inflation was up to about 50% and interest rates even higher. So I think cash is king. Then the other thing, I would actually quote Gene Cohn. Now, Gene Cohn of Cohn, Pedersen, Fox, they actually launched their practice in a downturn in the American economy. And within you know, 3 or 4 years, it was a substantial practice straight away. And actually, their policy was that while very little was going on, they really looked around for opportunities. Where were opportunities for development? They offered feasibility studies to developers, and the developers maybe would pay them a bit, maybe not, but those they made contacts, which then as soon as the market started to turn up, they were first in the queue for jobs for that particular project. So it's looking at opportunities within your particular field, making sure that you understand where those opportunities are, making contact with potential clients, and then growing a business out of that.
Okay, so key takeaway there is build your pipeline now, build relationships, because those relationships, when the times improve, they will remember you. So maybe a good point here is that as people are retreating a little bit and hibernating in their houses, working from home, thinking, okay, well, everything will sleep now for the next 6 months. Actually, don't behave like that. Find innovative ways to be out there talking to your clients, even if it's online, whatever way you choose, maybe even if it's through the old-fashioned post, but just to communicate. Communication is everything. And
we have a prime minister who said build, build, build. That can't be too bad for architects. May not be good for quality, but it's not bad for architects looking for work. We have a new planning system being proposed where design is on almost every second line of the whole proposal, and even proposes that local authorities have chief officers of design and placemaking, a whole new job in local authorities across the country. So yeah, look out for opportunities, I think, is my key message.
Fantastic. Peter, thank you so much. As always, you're a fountain of wisdom, and thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in person eventually.
Very good.
Thank
Great
you.
to speak to you, Del.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'll speak to you later on.